Hello and welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I am Anushri Nagpal from the Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia. I am presenting this module on behalf of Dr. Saleha Jamal. In this episode, we will learn about the concepts, types and distribution of biodiversity which comes under the paper Environmental Geography. The learning objectives are: first, explain the concept and definition of biodiversity. Second, recognize different elements of biodiversity. Third, explain the differences between ecosystem, species, genetic diversity. Fourth, learn distribution of biodiversity. Fifth, recognize major biodiversity threats. Introduction. The term biodiversity has been commenced by Walter Rosen in 1986. Biological diversity is abbreviated as biodiversity, which refers to the sum total of species, populations, communities, and ecosystems. It may also be defined as a variety and variability among the living organisms, including the unicellular fungi, protozoa, bacteria, and multicellular organisms such as plants, fishes, and mammals, and the ecological complexes, including gens, habitats, and ecosystems in which they occur. Elements of biodiversity. First, ecosystem difference. This is described by various types of ecosystems having certain set of environmental conditions together with biological population. In fact, ecosystem diversity refers to the number of ecosystems and different ecological processes operating in certain area. 2. Temporal difference refers to variation in time duration in terms of sequential progress of biotic communities. The biodiversity of an area is always measured in terms of temporal factor, that is, the condition of biological communities in the past, at the present time, and in future. Here we also learn the course of development and destruction of species and their future standing. 3. Genetic difference, which establishes richness of biological diversity of a specified ecosystem because genetic differences within and between the populations of species of an ecosystem verifies the nature and course of reproduction of species, productivity, adaptability to particular composite environmental conditions, and changes therein, capability, mutualism, etc. Fourth, species difference. This refers to the variety of species of biological population, including species of plants, animals, and microorganisms of a particular ecosystem. Species diversity determines a number of different species that are represented in a given community, which incorporates both species richness and the evenness of species abundances. The richer the variety of species, the larger and more complex is the food chain, and abundance is the biodiversity and more stable ecosystem. Types of biodiversity. Biodiversity can be divided into the following three levels. First, ecosystem or ecological diversity. B, species diversity. C, genetic diversity. First, ecosystem or ecological diversity. Biodiversity is considered at ecosystem level as it determines the variety and number of species in a particular ecosystem through the different habitats for biological communities and biological processes operating in each natural ecosystem. A region may have numerous ecosystems or it may have one. Vastness of oceans or deserts are examples of regions with small ecological diversity, while a mountain area which may have lakes, forests, and grasslands will have greater biodiversity. A region with numerous ecosystems may be able to provide more resources to help indigenous species to survive, particularly when one ecosystem is exposed by drought or disease. Ecosystem diversity is often assessed through the relative richness of diverse species and considering type of species. Ecosystem diversity has three outlooks. A. Alpha diversity. This is the biodiversity within a particular region, community, or ecosystem. It is usually expressed by the number of species in that ecosystem. This can be calculated by including the number of distinct groups of organisms, called taxa, within the ecosystem, which includes families, genera, and species. B. Beta diversity. Beta diversity is a measure of biodiversity which works by matching up the species diversity between ecosystems or along environmental pitches. This involves matching the number of taxa that are exclusive to each of the ecosystems. It depicts a range of communities due to substitution of species, which takes place due to the occurrence of diverse microhabitats, niches, and environmental conditions. C. Gamma diversity. It illustrates diversity of habitat over a total geographical area. It is a product of component ecosystem called the alpha diversity and between the component ecosystems called the beta diversity. Gamma diversity can be expressed in terms of the species abundance of component communities as follows. Y is equal to S1 plus S2 minus C, where S1 is the total number of species recorded in the first community, S2 is the total number of species recorded in the second community, and C is the number of species common to both communities. 2. Species diversity. Species is a fundamental unit of classification and is described as largest group of organisms in which two individuals can mate and produce fertile offspring, typically by sexual reproduction, and thus share a common ancestry. The number of species of flora and fauna that are present in an area comprise its species diversity. This diversity is seen both in natural ecosystem and in agricultural ecosystems. Some areas are richer in species than others. Every ecosystem contains a unique set of species, all interacting with each other, while some ecosystems could have numerous species than others. In some ecosystems, a particular species has grown so large that it takes over the natural community. A greater number of species can assist an ecosystem to pull through from the environmental threats, even if some species go extinct. The natural world contains about 8.7 million species according to a new estimate described by scientists as the most accurate ever. Various scientist groups are currently studying both species-rich groups and regions in order to give a reliable depiction of species richness patterns and a base for calculating the number of species on the earth. 3. Genetic diversity. Genetic diversity refers to variations of genes within a population or species. The genetic variation is vital for a vigorous breeding population of a species. Each and every individual of any animal or plant species varies widely from the other individuals in its genetic makeup due to the huge number of groupings possible in the genes that give every individual specific characteristics. Thus, for example, each and every human being is very different from all others. Genetic diversity can be measured using a variety of DNA-based and other techniques. The genetic material of microorganisms, plants, and animals contain information that determines the characteristics of all species and individuals that make up the diversity of the living world. Thus, genetic diversity refers to the differences in genetic makeup between distinct species and to genetic variations within a single species. In simple terms, genetic material dictates whether we have blue or brown eyes, blonde or black hair, and are tall or short. It also determines whether an individual animal or plant has the ability to survive in a particular habitat or under particular environmental conditions. Some plants, for example, are able to grow in saline water as a result of genetic variation. New genetic variation is produced in populations of organisms that can be reproducing sexually by recombination and in individuals by genes and chromosome mutations. The large differences in the amount and distribution of genetic variation can be attributed in part to the enormous variety and complexity of habitats and the different ways organisms obtain their living. Functional biodiversity. Number of scientists also identify the fourth level of biodiversity as functional biodiversity. Here, the way species act, obtain food, and utilize the natural resources of an ecosystem is known as functional diversity. Generally, a species-rich ecosystem is supposed to have high functional diversity, as there are numerous species which also vary in their behaviors. Studying an ecosystem's functional diversity can be helpful to the environmentalists trying to preserve or restore the damaged, because understanding the behaviors and functions of species can point to gaps in a food cycle or ecological niches that are lacking species. Important values of biodiversity. Values related to biodiversity can be grouped into two categories as below: direct values and indirect values. Direct values. The direct values include: first, consumptive use value, 2, productive use value. Consumptive use value. Here the biodiversity to products are consumed directly, for example food like plants and fishes, fuel like wood, coal, petroleum, natural gas, and drugs like quinine, penicillin, tetracycline, etc. Productive use values. In productive use, the product is commercially sold in national and international markets like textile, leather, silk, paper and pulp industries, etc. 2. Indirect values. Indirect values include social and cultural values, ethical values, aesthetic values, option values, and environmental services values. Social and cultural value. Some of the plants and animals are considered holy and sacred, particularly in India, like tulsi, people, cow, snake, etc. Ethical values. As all species have a right to exist independent of our needs for them and valuable for the sustenance of human race, so are related to conservation of biodiversity, laying ethical issue of conservation and preservation. Aesthetic value. There is a great aesthetic value which is attached to biodiversity. The natural landscapes provide prospects for leisure activities like bird watching, photography, etc., promoting ecotourism from zoological, botanical gardens, national parks, wildlife conservation, etc. Option values. Unidentified potentials of biodiversity include option values. Environment service values. This one of the important benefits of biodiversity which maintains environment services and includes: number 1, carbon dioxide fixation, 2, maintaining of essential nutrients by carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus cycles, 3, maintaining water cycle, 4, recharging of groundwater, 5, soil formation and protection from erosion, 6, recycling moisture into the atmosphere, 7, detoxification and decomposition of waste. Distribution of biodiversity. Uneven biodiversity distribution across the earth. Due to the tilt on its axis relative to the sun and curvature of the earth, different areas of the planet vary in amount of sunlight energy received through the year. Because of this, the duration of different seasons like warm, cold, wet and dry in different areas, as well as other environmental factors including temperature, humidity, etc., this varies. Due to this variation, the distribution of biodiversity varies, establishing different hotspots. One of the most important outcomes of different affecting factors in different regions of the planet has created particular sets of environmental settings which results in variation in predominant vegetation. The species living in different regions are distinguished by the adaptations which allow survival under the particular set of environmental conditions of the region and establishes biomes. A biome is a biological population of organisms related with particular climatic and geographic conditions like deserts, grasslands and tropical rainforests. These regions can be broadly classified into terrestrial biomes and aquatic ecosystems in which the biodiversity distribution varies. Terrestrial biomes. Terrestrial biomes are related to land, while aquatic biomes include both ocean and freshwater biomes. Terrestrial biomes are principally distinguished by climatic and geographic factors, where temperature and humidity play an important role in determining the type of species that can survive in a habitat. Warm and constant temperatures provide a more generous environment for different species survival. Thus, it is seen that as one moves away from the equator towards the poles, or increases in elevation causes decreases in average temperature and in turn decreasing the biodiversity of the habitat. The terrestrial biomes can be divided into 4 broad categories. First, forest, 2, desert, 3, savanna or grasslands, and 4th, tundra. Forests. Areas having large number of trees are termed as forest, or more simply it can be said as forest biomes dominated by trees. On the basis of the type of organisms that populate them and variation in temperature and precipitation, forest biomes can be divided into 3 distinct types. First, tropical, second, temperate, third, boreal. While depending on the type of trees in that area, forests can be further classified into 5 main categories. First, coniferous forest, second, deciduous forest, third, mixed-leaved forest, fourth, Mediterranean forest, fifth, tropical rainforests. Deserts. Deserts cover about 1/5 of the Earth's land surface and occur where rainfall is less than 50 centimeters a year. There are 4 main types of desert in this biome: hot and dry, semi-arid, coastal and cold. They are all able to inhabit plants and animal life that are able to survive there. Deserts are the driest landscapes on the earth and sustain the least amount of life. Biodiversity is lowest in these biomes. Most deserts occur along latitudes of 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south and therefore have generally hot climates. Most deserts have a considerable amount of specialized vegetation as well as specialized vertebrate and invertebrate animals in the desert. The biodiversity is not what you would think in the hot desert. The birds rely on the plants. There are surprisingly water in the desert that supports 20 species of fishes. There are also 5,000 to 6,000 desert plants in the desert that adapted to heat and low water resources. Reptiles are the most common animals in the desert. There are also about 20 species of birds in the deserts. Savanna and grassland. The most dominant vegetation in both savanna and grassland biomes is perennial grasses and non-woody forbs. Enough rainwater is available in savannas to support scattered trees, whereas grasslands do not. Thus, savannas are generally found in more tropical climates, while grasslands occur in temperate climates with hot summers and cold winters, having deep soil rich in organic matter. The abundant grasses of savannas and grasslands support large herds of herbivore like the wild beast, bison, zebras, gazelles. The American bison of US grasslands was nearly hunted to extinction in the 1800s. A concerted conservation effort has put this species back on track to recovery. Tundra. Tundra is the coldest biome with average winter temperature of -34 degrees Celsius and summer temperatures between 3 and 12 degrees Celsius. The warmer growing seasons last only 50 to 60 days. Here very few plants grow due to the lack of nutrients and because the ground is frozen beneath the top layer of soil. The only vegetation that grows there are shrubs, sedges, mosses, lichens, grasses, and a couple of birch trees and willow trees. Nearly there are 48 different species of land mammals like hare, rodents, wolves, bears, foxes and deer, caribou, oxen, polar bears and wolverine, etc. in the tundra. Mostly found insects in the tundra include black flies, deer flies and mosquitoes. The mosquitoes have adapted to the cold environment by replacing the water in their bodies with glycerol to keep themselves from freezing. Aquatic ecosystems. Water is a common link among the aquatic ecosystems and it makes up the largest portion of the biosphere. This is where life began billions of years ago. Without water, organisms would be unable to sustain themselves. Aquatic ecosystems support high diverse groups of organisms and are classified into 2 broad categories: freshwater and saltwater or marine. Aquatic biodiversity can be defined as the variety of life and the ecosystems that make up the freshwater, tidal and marine regions of the world and their interactions. Aquatic biodiversity encompasses freshwater ecosystems, including lakes, ponds, reservoirs, rivers, streams, groundwater, and wetlands. It also consists of marine ecosystems, including oceans, estuaries, salt marshes, seagrass beds, coral reefs, kelp beds, and mangrove forests. Aquatic biodiversity includes all unique species and their habitats and interaction between them. It consists of phytoplankton, zooplankton, aquatic plants, insects, fish, birds, mammals, and others. Major biodiversity threats. First, habitat destruction, extinction of agriculture, shifting agriculture. 3. Filling up of wetlands. 4th, pollution. 5th, conversion of rich biodiversity site for human settlement and industrial development. 6. Destruction of coastal areas. 7. Poaching. 8. Introducing exotic species. 9. Uncontrolled exploitation of resources. 10. Diseases. Thank you.